Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Passion for the Wild and Wonderful. I'm Chris Ashley. Today I want to talk about 6 mistakes that I've made here somewhat recently and over the years, I guess, of me turkey hunting. So some I can relate to just in this past year, and some are ones that, I'll be honest, it's like the definition of insanity. I've made them over and over, yet I keep expecting different results. So let me start out with you for number 1. So calling too much. I'll tell you a story here. When I was younger, I remember my dad and I had located that there were some birds in this field, and there was some multiple gobblers I think that were out there. But I was old enough to be on my own and separated from him. So he said, "I tell you what, you go to one side of the field, and I'll go on the upper end side of the field. We'll both call." And there's a good chance that one of us will pull a bird in and get a shot. So I said, okay. So I go and I set up on my side of the field, and I'm working a mouth call, and man, I'm loving just listening to those gobblers hammer, and they're out there hitting off of me, and I keep calling, and then I'll shut up for just a little bit, and then I'll keep calling, and anyways, long story short, they're just hammering, and I sit there and I'm thinking, Dad is not calling at all. That little dirty dog, he's not calling at all. And so next thing I know, I notice the birds are going away from me. So what do? I call even more, and I get even more aggressive. And next thing I know, I hear his 10 gauge go off. So I have to admit, I'm sitting there all mopey and droopy and bawling my eyes out, and I get over to him, and of course he's happy and celebrating, and I'm like, why'd you shoot my turkey? And I now see, as me being a father and older, that Dad told me as we went, and they happened to have a blind there, and it started raining, and we went over and sat in that blind for a little bit, and he's like, I wish I'd have never even shot this turkey now. And it wasn't like him being mean. He was showing me how it feels, I guess, being a father, and how you really want your kids to be the ones to succeed and to shine. And I see that now. It was not funny for me at the time. I was so sad, like I said, and he felt so bad that he's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have never shot that turkey. But to that point, it made me really realize, and it was one of the first times that it became obvious to me that what he was doing was just being more patient, being more subtle, and slow playing the situation. He wasn't playing me, he was playing the birds. That, hey, they're henned up, you don't want to be too over aggressive, you don't want to call too much, and work the birds and let them come into you. And here I am doing the exact opposite, which, a person would probably love to have in their situation as well, of calling way too much. And I wasn't working the hens and pulling the hens in with the gobbler in tow. Instead, I was intimidating them or threatening them, and they took the gobblers away, and my dad was successful. So that was an eye-opener for me that, sometimes less is more. And in that situation, Dad came out with the gobbler in hand, and I came home with a lesson learned. So, number 2, I've talked about it in some of the other videos. If you haven't seen it, go back, look at some of the ones I talked about on tips and tricks. But taking a shot that's too far, something outside of the effective range of the weapon of choice, whether it be a bow or a gun. So this is one that I'd made a mistake of in the past, to where I was not necessarily aware of where my effective range was. I hadn't sat down at the spot and mentally processed and said, okay, that is 50 yards. If that bird is past that distance, I am not taking that shot. And so I had before where I called a bird in, and it was one of those where I was sitting in an open area, a pocket, like field or gas well in a pocket of woods, and the bird comes in and obviously isn't seeing the hen. Now, I don't think I had a decoy on the one I'm thinking about up. So again, they're coming in, hearing calling, expecting to see something, and there's nothing there. And the bird hung up. And, you know, I tried to wait him out. Occasionally, if he turns strutting and puts his tail up and starts going away, I maybe hit some purrs real quick. But he stayed out there. And eventually, I did go ahead and, wrong of me, I took the shot thinking, hey, I think I've made a shot that far before. I'm sure I can get that bird. And ended up, you know, the bird was fine. It took off running. It took off flying. And again, another lesson learned, that as I stepped it off, I realized, oh my gosh, you know, from sitting down and judging where I thought that bird had come into, he was maybe over 60 yards away. And it was like, I should have never tried to make that shot. So that was, like I said, a lesson learned on that. Know what your effective range is. When you go to sit down to try to set up, or even if it's a rush setup that, you know, all of a sudden, boom, you hear a gobbler over the bank or over a hillside around a bend. Set up, try to get a quick feel for your surroundings of how far, and calibrate yourself that, okay, that bird has to be within this range for me to take my shot. So this one's one that I learned this year. I made this mistake actually a couple times. So the situation this year was number 3, setting up too close to what I say is a hill crest. So the setup that I had was, there was a gobbler that was roosted just over this bank. And it wasn't a general hill that would normally come up on flats and then kind of flatten out on top. It sort of was mounded. So for me, it was such a narrow crest that I couldn't get over the top of the hill and be set up without that bird skylining me or picking me up. So what my original thought was okay, what I'm going to do, and this will help hide all my movement and everything, is I'm going to set up about 15-20 yards back, and I'll be on the back side of this crest so that when he pops up, I'll make the shot, and he's none the wiser. He won't even have time to spot me. So anyways, I set up on this bird, comes in on a string, you know, I'm listening to him come in the crunchy leaves, and I've got my gun set up, you know, say you're the camera, I've got my gun set up on him, and I'm listening, and next thing I know, I see his head pop up over here. Well, guess what? When you're only set up 10, 15, 20 yards from the crest of that hill, and of course you set up in a way that when he, you know, periscopes up with his neck, all you see is the vital area that you're wanting to hit. And at the same time, I'm thinking I need to swing on him, but he was far enough around that when I tried to start doing my swing, he picked me up, and as I said, all he had to do was drop that head below that crest, and he was out of range before I could jump up and try to see about having a shot. So you would think I'd have learned, but days later, birds set up in the exact same roost tree. I do the exact same thing. The bird comes up and then ends up kind of side hilling a little bit, and ended up I didn't get the bird. And then from there on, it was one of those, it's like, okay, I know what to do in this situation now. It's sunk in. I've done this enough times. Never was able to get back on that bird again. So finally I'd wisened him up that he moved out of the area. So anyways, that was number 3. Number 4. So everybody likes to go ahead and, you know, for me, one of the things I like to do with my diaphragm calls is the night before is I try to get them good and moist. I take toothpicks and separate the reeds and then snap them off just so that I have the ends in there so the reeds can dry and it keeps them separated. The other thing I like to do is I like to chalk my push-pull calls. So one of the things I've learned, though, is that you need to cycle those calls, the push-pull calls, before you go out to hunt the next day. So what I learned is I'm sitting there, and normally for me, I don't call onto my push-pull call until they're normally within an area where I need to start doing purrs. I'm not great doing purrs with my mouth call, and I feel more comfortable doing it with that push-pull call. So, but what I learned then is at the same time too, when I'm using it, they're also normally closer. So I would start to use the push-pull call to go into purrs, and it wouldn't the drag wasn't there to make that purr, and it was more of just a smooth or squeaks. And it's one of those that all of a sudden you're in panic trying to cycle it to try to get it to get back to where it's getting to that little bit of bite on the wood or on glass to make that purr. So, you never know, okay, did I mess this up? Did I just blow this bird coming in or what? But it just takes a few seconds after you chalk the calls. Go ahead and just cycle them a few different times, work in that initial layer, and after that, you should be good to go. Number 5, spooking a bird off a roost. So there's a fine line about trying to get inside a bird's comfort zone and get as close as you can on a bird when it's on the roost. That way it makes it easier. Hopefully when that bird flies down, maybe you've got a chance at a shot immediately, or that when it flies down, you're within a very close range that there's less likely of a chance for a hen to come in and maybe take that gobbler away from you. So it's always good to try to get as close as you can to the bird on roost, but again, it's a fine line getting too close to where you might bust the bird off. So what that really is referencing to is with respect to foliage. So early in the spring or early in the turkey season, there's no foliage on the trees. So the bird will sound like it's a lot closer than it actually is. So you need to watch on your setups that you need to take that into account, that you might be able to get that little extra distance that you think is pushing it, but it's actually that the bird's a little bit further than you think. On the flip side, later in the season, when all the foliage is on, the bird will actually sound a lot further away than it actually is. So you've got to be careful, especially with the foliage on, that you don't get in too close and then next thing you know, you bust the bird off. So I'll tell you a story about that one. So for me, as an example, I roosted the bird the night before. I was roosting him from quite a long ways away, but I still felt that I knew where he was. And originally what I thought was he was up on top of the hill. And so my thought was, okay, what I'm going to do is work my way up the hill in the morning, and just as it's starting to break light, I'll just take set against a tree here and let the bird sound off and have a better feel for where he actually is, and I can adjust as need be. So I hike my way up the hill, and I lean over to take a little break against the tree, and next thing I know, I could see in the skyline of the breaking sky that the bird was almost above me, just a couple trees away up in there. So I ended up just slowly hunkering down, but needless to say, when it got eventually light, he didn't bust off the roost, but he pitched off and went completely away from me immediately. So I'm sure he was able to see me coming in and working my way up, and not just that, but hearing me as well. So, and final one I'll say is number 6. So this one I think is key for all hunters, okay? Patience, 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 okay? So, one, Dad and I, a lot of times when I was first turkey hunting, we'd set up, we'd be calling, and you feel like you're not getting anything. It's one of those where the woods are quiet, you're not getting that engagement or reaction from a gobbler. You're just plain blind calling. That we've had where we've sat up, done some scenario setups, and are just kind of chilling out for a little bit, and then it's one of those, it's like, well, I'm not hearing anything. Are you hearing anything? No. Well, let's call it a day. We get up, and next thing you know, 50, 60 yards away, boom, there busts up a huge gobbler flying away that had come in silent. So what I would tell you is look, if you've sat and said, okay, I'm going to give it 15 minutes, or I'm going to give it 30 minutes, or 45 minutes, okay, give it that, and then maybe give it another 15, 20, or 30, okay? Because sometimes a bird might be hung up, or he might be quiet, or he might just be breaking off. He's maybe been pressured, and it's not uncommon for a bird to come in quiet, and next thing you know, all of a sudden, boom, there's a bird. And you never heard him, never nothing, okay? So I'll give you another story here. Again, it's me learning from patience when I was younger. So roosted a bird. Dad and I both knew where this bird was. So again, he says, you know what? I'll circle around to the other side of the hill, and you go on this side. And you know, to me, I think what you'll get out of some of these stories is I like to say that I was Dad's best beagle dog turkey hunting for him when I was younger, because it seemed like I liked to flush the birds to him. So on this one, bird flew down. I felt good. He was working to me. I could hear him gobbling good, and I couldn't at that time. I couldn't hear whether Dad was calling or not, and I could tell the bird was coming back and forth. But then it felt like he was going away, and it was going around the hillside versus where Dad was. So I thought, well, what I'll do is circle around and try to get up on top and see if I can't call that bird up. So I circled around, and I don't know if it's ever happened to you guys, but it's happened to me a couple times where I kick myself afterwards, that I sit there, and next time I call, once I'm set up, he gobbles pretty much, I think, right where I had been sitting. And it's one of those, it's like, oh no, I should have never moved. So I sit there and I'm trying to work him, and now he's over where I'd originally called, and he had pretty much shut up and then committed and came in silent to where my setup was. So I keep working, and eventually I feel like he's moving away from me again. So I circle back around to my original spot again, thinking, hey, you know what, he's been here, he's comfortable, I'll be able to pull him back in. Well, needless to say, he hadn't left yet, and he was still there. Next thing I know, boom, I hear the alarm putt. I see him take off running around the hill, and it's one of those that you just sit there going 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, boom! And I hear the 10 gauge go off again. So, needless to say, Dad was sitting there saying, wow, you know, you're a great beagle dog for me. You chased me another one or pushed another one to me. So guys, in that situation, be patient, okay? It's not always that the gobbler comes straight in on a string. Play the slow game, okay? I've learned, like I said, less is more. Let those gobblers work. If they're with a hen, let them work off with the hen. If you can't pull the hen in, be aware too that it's a good chance, just like what was kind of happening there, that gobbler makes a mental note in my mind of where you were set up, in the general area at least. And if he works off with some hens and stuff, and I've said it in the other videos, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock, midday, that bird will come back into that general area where he left, knowing there were some other hens feeding, to see if they happen to be in that area. And it can be another great chance to pay off on being able to take a bird home. So, hey, I want to say thank you for joining me again. If you guys like the content, please subscribe. If you haven't, like it for me. And keep checking back. I'm going to have some new information out there for you. Again, I just love bringing this to you. I have a huge love, joy, passion for the wild and wonderful of turkey hunting and just being in the outdoors anyways. So, guys, thanks again. We'll catch up with you next time.